I'd like to call the Region 15 Board of Education meeting to order. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Student representatives, Aaron and Nick, please.
Good evening. First news for the night is that auditions have started for the PHS Talent Show, which will be held on February 25th at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. There were also multiple successful midterm and studying and tutoring events these past 2 weeks. Link Cruise, Cocoa, and Cram hosted around 50 freshmen who got help from their upperclassmen peers in a variety of subjects. And Science National Honor Society's second Science and Snacks held close to 90 students from various grades who were tutored in science. Also, students on the Pomperaug High School Model United Nations team will be taking their annual trip to Boston next weekend for the Harvard Model UN conference. This year, students are representing the delegation from Kazakhstan and are taking part in committees discussing various global issues, including nuclear disarmament, research ethics, and protection of indigenous peoples. That's all, and here's Nick.
I have an update on winter sports. The boys basketball team has a 9-2 record, and their next game is tomorrow at home at 7 o'clock. Girls basketball has a 10-3 record, and their next game is tomorrow at 7 at Joel Barlow. Hockey has a 3-5 record, and tonight they're playing at 8:30 against Guilford. Wrestling has a Wednesday home meet at 6 o'clock. Cheerleading, gymnastics, indoor track, and boys swimming are all doing well and are competing this week. Thank you.
Any questions of Aaron and Nick? Okay, there being none, thank you very much. We have no...
Best wishes on your exams. Study hard.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have any presentations tonight. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 11th regular meeting, please?
Motion to approve the January 11th, 2016 regular meeting.
Is there a second? Any additions, omissions, or corrections? There being none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the January 11th executive session, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any additions, omissions, or corrections? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you. Information and proposals, board committee reports, Finance and Facilities Committee, please.
Madam Chair, the Finance Committee met on January 13th and had a productive meeting. We reviewed the year-to-date object report, and we continue to face unanticipated costs that have resulted in the freeze. The state is expected to announce this month what funding they will release to the school district for their share of the special education costs. This is the funding of excess costs that we are watching closely and have been preparing for since the time they announced the funding of excess costs is expected to be less than the originally anticipated and less than the level they should be funding the district at. We will continue to work with the administration as we navigate the current waters, and once the amounts are released, Mr. McLiberty's and Mrs. Bofford's will guide us to a smooth landing at the conclusion of the fiscal year ending 6/30/16. That is it, Madam Chair.
Any questions of Paul? Okay, move on to Policies and Curriculum Committee. Steve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. P&C met on January 11th, and as a result, we have, well, not as a result, we have 5 policies we're voting on tonight, and I went over those policies at our last meeting and the reasons that those policies are before the board for votes tonight. Now, as a result of our January 11th meeting, you also have received three packets in your policies, three policies in your packet tonight for a first read. 5114, student discipline. It is recommended for a minor change due to Public Act 15206, where we have to add the vapor products definition into the policy. And then there's Public Act 1596, which actually had us add language for suspensions and expulsions of students in preschool through grade 2. So let's hope we don't ever get to that. Then we have, for a first read, policy 5113. That's an attendance and truancy policy, which has been changed now to attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism. Public Act 15225 requires the board to formally request of the superintendent to address chronic absenteeism if it should be occurring in the district. Policy 5153, which is reports of suspected abuse or neglect of children. We added an appendix to that to define sexual assault. Also related to this policy, Public Act 15205, an act protecting school children. So so regarding people who are convicted of abuse or neglect, the law requires us to update the policy on how we deal with these people if they are already employees or are applying for a job. There's a lot in that policy, so if you read it and you have any questions, please bring them to the next meeting or shoot me an email. Secondly, last year, the district implemented a 5-year curriculum review calendar. This current calendar calls for a 1-year study to be conducted in year 1 for the subject that is under review, and then curriculum work is done in the summer, and implementation of the new curriculum begins in year 2. However, several issues have arisen. There is often inadequate time to complete curriculum writing in the summer, giving teachers incomplete documents and/or no advanced time to prepare for implementation. No time is built into the calendar to search for appropriate materials to implement the new curriculum, and even if materials are found prior to the start of year 2, there is no money specifically budgeted for any new materials because the district's annual budget, as we know, is vetted by us, the board, in February and March. With this in mind, Assistant Superintendent Gussenberg and Superintendent Botsberg have developed a new curriculum review calendar and process. The overall calendar is changing from 5 to 6 years. That means each subject area will begin its review process once every 6 years. And instead of the 2 years, it will now take 3 years to conduct a review of a single subject of study. Year 1 is review. The district will do an in-depth look at the present program to determine if it meets the newest standards. They will review what assessments tell us of the effectiveness of the present program, investigate the latest research, and see how the district's instructional methodologies, if they are current or not. Year 2 is development. Curriculum documents are revised or rewritten as needed. Materials are reviewed, and if new curriculum and instructional materials are needed, they are presented to the board. Year 3 is implementation, and years 4 to 6 are for monitoring and adjustments, review, and feedback. Presently, developmental guidance and social studies are in year 1 of the review process. Next year, they will be in year 2. Science and world language will be in year 1 next year. So as when the minutes are posted online, there'll be there's a chart and some more detailed explanation in a presentation that Rich had given the committee. That is my report.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions of Steve? Okay, thank you. Other committee reports, PTO Advisory Council? No report. Thank you, Jennifer. Board member comments? There being none. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the pleasure of sharing with the board and members of the public just a few photographs that I had taken in a visit to our elementary schools recently. I think it's a nice opportunity for a little mid-year check-in on the Bridges math. I had shown you some pictures, and we had discussed some of the cognitive work that was going on earlier in the year. We're now about halfway through, and I thought you might like to take a peek. So you'll see, if you recall from what we had looked at earlier in the year, we found a lot of patterning in the calendars. Do you remember that? Yeah. Okay, so you'll see now, I can get this a little bit bigger. There's a little bit of a pattern in here. Would anybody like to look and see what the pattern is? The pattern itself, in and of itself, is not terribly interesting. The mathematics is much more interesting, in my opinion. But what do you see as a pattern? Is there a relationship between the date and the numbers that are contained there? 5, 6, 7. I can't make it any bigger. I'm sorry. It's not truly a trick question. Do you see? So for, let's see, for the 9th, ooh, which is a Saturday, how cool, you must do that on Friday. So we wind up with an answer being 9. And do you see that for the 3rd, we actually wind up with an answer being 3, but notice that the equal sign's kind of flipped around there, right? You know, we're used to seeing the equal sign on the right-hand side, and now we see it on the left. That's some important mathematics. Isn't that very nice? It's beautiful, isn't it? And you'll see the same thing for the number 11. Thank you, Mr. Babrick. That 11 is equal to 5 plus, and what number would go in that empty box? I know we all, this is not a trick question. I know we all know the answer to that one. 6, very good, excellent. So yeah, there you go. Also, if you take a look at any of the story problems, you'll notice in the story problems, the kids had 7 balls, they lost some. Now they have only 4. How many did they lose? It's a subtraction sentence, but it's not the typical subtraction sentence. The more typical subtraction would say they had 7 balls, 4 rolled away, how many are left? That's a different model of subtraction. This model of subtraction is a little bit harder, and it's very, very helpful for kids. Would anybody like to think about what the number sentence would say if they had 7 balls and then they lost some? 7, and then they lost. That's the blank. What symbol goes before the blank? Because they're losing some balls. Yeah, there we go. We're going to get this. This is called collaboration. 7 minus blank. Anybody else can chime in. You're all welcome to. Okay, excellent. There we go. 7 minus blank gives us a result of having only 4 balls left. And of course, the number that goes in the blank is how many balls did they lose? And the answer, we all know, is 3. Excellent. You are smarter than a first grader. This was a first grade calendar. Okay, let's go on to the next picture. That was first grade. Okay, this is kindergarten. And in this picture, what the children are doing is they're looking at some dot patterns and they're identifying how many dots are there. The particular question that was being asked by the teacher, and that's why you see some hands up, was how many dots are represented here. Now this may be a little bit difficult to see. I don't know if you can see it. Can you tell how many dots, or you can tell by comparing to this? In every case, the frame around those dots is always the same. Can you tell how many the whole frame would hold? Because that's significant and important. Yeah, it is 10, and really the only way you could see that would be by looking at this. It's a little bit hard to see, but I apologize. So the question was, how many dots are here? Now, there's no question in my mind that everybody in this room can identify how many dots are here. I know you all know the answer. It is not a trick question, but this part is the trick question. For any of you here in this room, would you look at that and would you go to figure out how many dots? How many of you would go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Would anybody actually count them by ones? Anybody? You might count by 2s? Okay.
I can't promise.
Okay, by 3s. So the answer that the child gave to how they knew that this was 6 was they said that they saw it as 3 and 3. And that's a step toward what we call in the research subitizing. What we want is we want children to look at numbers, larger and larger collections of number. so that when we look at this, we all see it. We are all perfect at subitizing at this point in our lives. We all look at this and say, oh yeah, there's 6. And if I look really closely, I can see 6 and 4 make 10. And that could be a place that we're going. But for today, we're just looking to identify, we're looking to identify how many are there. Not all children are there yet, but it's very, very developmentally appropriate. Okay? Isn't that fun? This is kindergarten. That's correct. Isn't that impressive? Yes. Excellent. Okay. This was first grade. It happened to be the 83rd day of school. On the 83rd day of school, we had the number 83. We wrote it out in words. We wrote it out as 8 10s and 3 1s. And look at all those number sentences that were generated by the children, all equaling 83. Pretty impressive for first grade, don't you think? First grade. Notice also that we have 2 ways of looking at the number sentences, just like you saw on the calendar. We have sort of the more traditional notation with the 83 on the right, and then we have this other notation, equally correct, and very important to see, with 83 equal to 75 plus 8. Okay? Notice we also had some discussion about this. Anyone want to read this one to me?
90 is greater than 83.
Excellent. 90 is greater than 83. Thank you very much, Mrs. Gaka. Okay, beautiful. Okay, and for the last one, this is a page from a workbook. And I'm going to try to make this a little bit bigger. Also first grade. Also on the 83rd day. And this will be a little bit hard to read. The question on the top says, how many days have you been in school? The answer is 83. And then we color in how many squares to show how many days you've been in school. Okay? Now, to understand the value of this, if you look at this entire grid, would anyone like to hazard a guess as to how many boxes or how many little squares there are in the entire grid? Yep, you got 10s in here. Yep. You got 10. Right. Yeah, yep. Right. You've got 10 rows and you've got 10 columns. They are 10s. So altogether we have 100. Well, that's quite significant because each column is a 10. So as they are coloring in, they're counting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 8 10s and 3 1s. Okay? There's place value going on, being colored in, developmentally quite appropriate. Look at question 3. How many squares are not colored in? Now, we could look at those squares and we could actually count them by ones. We could also look at them and recognize that we have 10 in this whole column, and we have, well, let's see if I've done this often enough. I'm probably figuring that this line is going right across the middle, so I've got 5 here and 2 more, right? So you see how the visual just gives the children an opportunity to do the numerical, the quantitative reasoning. There are 17 that are not colored in, and the children did go ahead to figure this out. I just couldn't stay to see the very end of this. And then the question is, fill in the parts on the number tree. This is the beginning of the number tree. Number tree is today's language for what we used to call just plain old fact families, okay? So what they would do is they would say the 100 is sort of composed of the 83, which goes here, and the 17, which goes here. And out of that, we have 4 different facts in that fact family. But it's very child-friendly notation that takes them to the next step. Now, I'll bet you didn't think that in first grade we would have children saying things like 83 plus 17 is 100. Just thought you might like that little walk through kindergarten and first grade. And that's the end of my report. You all did very, very well. Thank you for playing this game with me. I do appreciate your willingness to participate. There is no personnel report tonight. And Mr. Suriani was speaking before about policy that had to do with chronic absence. None of our district schools have a level as defined by the state of chronic absence, just as a piece of information. And that's it.
That's in regard to teachers.
No, that's student
students.
absence.
Okay.
That's student.
Well, I would feel better if they were teachers that were not chronically absent, but. Okay, thank you. Comments from citizens? Okay, there being none, we have no old business. I do, and I want to do it now. I have in front of me a draft for the budget presentation and the budget workshops, and I would like to get that out to the public as soon as possible. February 22nd, I'm sorry, our superintendent will be presenting her budget to us. On March 2nd, we will have a board workshop. Wednesday, March 16th, we will have a workshop. Wednesday, March 23rd, we will have a board workshop. And Wednesday, March 30th, a fourth workshop if necessary. On April 4th, a public hearing on the budget will take place. And then we will approve, the board will approve a budget. And let's see, the budget referendum is May 4th. We will have our district meeting the night before, and then move to have the budget referendum on May 4th.
Do we have
So-
a time and a place for the workshops?
I would assume that we're going to be doing them in the media center at the high school. I don't have a time. 7 o'clock in the media center here. Okay. No old business, new business requiring board action. I need a motion for approval of updates to policy number 1331, prohibition against smoking.
Motion to approve that the Board of Education, upon recommendation by the Policy and Curriculum Committee, approves the updates to policy number 1331, prohibition against smoking as presented.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. I need a motion for approval of updates to policy number 4139, acceptable employee use of technology resources.
Move that the Board of Education, upon recommendation by the Policy and Curriculum Committee, approves the updates to policy number 4139, acceptable employee use of technology resources as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstention? Unanimous, thank you. I need a motion for approval of updates to policy number 4235, alcohol, tobacco, and drug-free workplace.
Move that the Board of Education, upon recommendation by the Policy and Curriculum Committee, approve the updates to policy number 4235, alcohol, tobacco, and drug-free workplace as presented.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous, thank you. I need a motion for approval of updates to policy number 6163.6, student use of the district's computer systems and internet safety.
Move that the Board of Education, upon recommendation by the Policy and Curriculum Committee, approves the updates to policy number 6163.6, student use of district computer systems and internet safety as presented.
Was there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous, thank you. I need a motion for approval of updates to policy number 6145, curriculum exemptions.
Move that the Board of Education, upon recommendation by the Policy and Curriculum Committee, approves the updates to policy number 6145, curricular exemptions as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous, thank you. Okay, announcement of future meetings. Tomorrow evening, on January 26th, the Board of Education will have a special meeting workshop for the purpose of an FOIA presentation. Tom Hennick from the state is coming down to speak with us. We'll be meeting at in the central office conference room at 6 o'clock. Hopefully, we will not have a snow date, which would be the following evening on January 27th. On Monday, February 8th, Policies and Curriculum Committee will meet in the Media Center Conference Room at 6:30. That same night, we will have a Board of Education meeting here in this room at 7:30. And Wednesday, February 10th, the Finance and Facilities Committee will meet in central office at 5:30.
I believe it's 6:30.
6:30. Okay. Yep. Okay. There being nothing else, I'm glad we kept the meeting short because we're probably going to have a long meeting tomorrow night. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
A second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Good evening.